The agenda this week reevaluated the use of prescription anti-anxiety meds known as benzos, learned about electroconvulsive therapy to treat depression, and considered ways to improve physical literacy in young people. The agenda's Week in Review begins examining claims for and against reductions in municipal transfers. Sheldon, can we do this? We put up these pie charts here. This is what the Toronto Public Health 2019 budget looks like. Two charts, and for people listening on podcast, I'll just describe them here. The pie chart on the left has got $151 million of provincial funding and $43 million of City of Toronto funding, 75-25 in a ratio. The new charts that they're putting forward say that the new funding formula has the provincial allocation essentially cut in half to $86 million. The $43 million from the city stays the same, but of course it leaves a $65 million unfunded obligation compared to the last time. So first question is, do you dispute any of these numbers?
Yes, I don't dispute the existing numbers, what it exists right now, the $151 million and the $43 million from the city. But the other numbers that the city's come up with, we have disputed all the way along. We don't agree with those numbers at all. We're talking about a very modest realignment of services in public health, and the amount of funding that we would be giving, for example, next year would be $114 million.
You believe that the correct number is not $86 million from the province, but $114 million?
Yes.
All right, well, which still leaves tens of millions of dollars of unfunded at the moment, obligations, right?
It's $33 million, and we don't consider them unfunded obligations. We're asking the city to look at the programs, to prioritize, and to make the best choices they can. We're all working hard to get the maximum value we can for taxpayer dollars, especially in every area, but especially in healthcare. It's very important, we believe that they can find some efficiencies and maybe some things that we can do better and deliver better. What
is the justification from going from a 75-25 cost-sharing arrangement to a 50-50 cost-sharing arrangement?
Well, under the Health Protection and Promotion Act, municipalities are responsible to provide public health services. In the past, it was a 50-50 cost share arrangement. More recently, there has been a 75-25 cost share arrangement, but we feel that it makes sense to make it more of a 50-50 arrangement going forward. It's an important thing that municipalities have a say in what they're providing with the services, and we want to make sure that everybody is looking at how they maximize how to spend those health dollars.
Let's use your number just for argument's sake, $33 million. You know, it's on a $11 billion budget in the City of Toronto, it's not that much money, but it still has got to be found.
So it's actually less than 1/4% of the City of Toronto's budget, which is $13.5 billion, I believe. So it's a very small amount of money. It's 0.24. It's 2/1000th of the budget. So it's a very small amount of money.
But it's something they didn't think they had to find.
Sure, but we know that there are lots of places in the budget of the City of Toronto, like all governments, where there are inefficiencies.
Is it your view, Deb Hutton, to you first, is it your view that these cuts will have no consequences at all?
I think where Joe and I agree is on the in-year cuts, or what he considers to be retroactive cuts. I do believe if the province continues down that path that we will see some unintended consequences, because I think it's difficult to make changes that I think can be made if you have to do it in-house, in year, given that the budget's already been passed. That being said, we have a double-digit deficit in this province. We have to tackle that, or we end up in a fiscal and economic situation that's not palatable if we don't.
When you say double-digit, I think you actually mean a 9-digit. You're talking like...
Oh, sorry, yeah. But
north of $10 billion.
We're north of $10 billion,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I was a little confused when you looked at me. And I also believe, by the way, not just that we have to tackle the deficit for obvious reasons, but we actually have some program deficits within health and education that if we don't take some of the non-core expenses away, we're not going to be able to keep pace with the needs that we have today, even after many years of liberal overspending. You walk into any school today and any hospital, and we're not at the level of service that we should be at, given the amount of money that we spent.
John Snoblen, this was an exercise that you performed back in the day, going back 25 years now, during the Mike Harris years. Is it possible to cut spending this much without ramifications?
No, there are going to be ramifications anytime you withdraw funding or you reduce the rate of growth of funding, which is really what we're talking about. But the real threat on social services in the province of Ontario is the fastest growing expenditure in the provincial government's line, and that's interest on debt. And every year you put off making those budget changes, every moment that you put off, you exasperate that growing part of the budget called interest payments. And that really threatens healthcare, really threatens education, really threatens social services. So someone needs to do something, and they need to do it now.
You are here not just representing your city, but you're here representing large urban agglomerations all over the province of Ontario and the mayors that represent those cities. Up until now, your group has kind of held its fire against the Ford government, but not now. How come you've come out now against?
Well, many mayors were reaching out to me as the chair of the Large Urban Mayors Caucus of Ontario, and that's 28 mayors that have a population of 100,000 or more. It represents 67% of the province population. And I was getting calls from several of the members saying, you know, we're experiencing these cuts that are in year that were after many cities have already passed their budgets. We were never consulted. We were never given the heads up. And that frustrated a lot of mayors because our letter that we sent last week was quite clear. We understand the debt, we understand the deficit, we understand that things are going to need to be changed. But the mayors across the province are united in our voice in saying we want to work with you, but you're not on that side of the table at all. And so we really are reaching out to the government to say, you've got a willing partner, a respectful, authentic, willing partner on this side of the table. Come, we want to pull the chair up for you on this side. Give us at least some heads up and some breathing room and some runway to understand these types of cuts and changes that you're making. And they can call it modernization or they can call it something else, but really at the end of the day, they are straight up cuts. And at the end of the day, it's our citizens that we represent as the mayors that are coming to us that are the exact same citizens that the Premier and that government also represents. It's for all Ontarians that we need to be able to find those programs and services that are dearly needed by them.
How surprised were you that they made this announcement in the middle of a budget year where you guys have already done your bookkeeping, so to speak?
Very, and what's frustrating to me and to others is that many of the MPPs that are there, they come from a municipal background. Some of them were councillors or some of them were former mayors. They know straight up that we have a different fiscal year. And we've made that known to them even before the budget. And instead of recognizing those differences between the municipal government and the provincial government, they still went ahead with these. And we felt that it was done in sort of a stealth way. They're doing it through
you called it downloading by stealth.
Yeah,
what does that mean?
Downloading by stealth. It's not coming directly to municipalities, to mayors, and to councils and saying this is what's going on. It's going through agencies, going through public health, or going through conservation authorities, or going through social service providers that have a direct relationship with municipalities, especially on a funding level. And at the end of the day, those cuts and service changes that are happening there directly flow right back up to the municipality, and we're left to try to figure out how to deal with that.
Let me follow up with Joe Cressy here, because you garnered quite a number of headlines last week when you called a news conference with the medical officer of health for the City of Toronto, and you put it right out there, Joe. You said bluntly, people are going to die because of these cutbacks. Mm-hmm. You standing by that today?
You know, I firmly believe, Steve, that you should only yell fire if there is a fire. And when you cut public health, according to the Ontario's past doctor, Dr. David Mowat, and to our Chief Medical Officer of Health, Dr. Eileen de Villa, when you cut public health, people will die. It's not rhetoric, it's simply a fact. And here's why. When public health works, it's invisible. There has never been a headline of child doesn't get meningitis or E. coli outbreak avoided. When public health works, it prevents diseases. And what is so unfortunate here when we talk about debt and the need to tackle it is that when you invest in public health, that is the fiscally responsible place to invest, and it actually reduces healthcare costs.
You think about the repetitive movements of hockey, you think about goalies, like 13-year-old goalies with the hips of people much, much older than 13 years old, and getting out, and yes, it was the physiological aspect of it, but there's also the burnout that, I mean, you mentioned earlier about the children who burn out before they even hit their teenage years because it's not fun anymore. You know, Ray Ferraro is a longtime NHL player working now for TSN and said that, yeah, as soon as he was done, as soon as his team was eliminated from the hockey playoffs, the rule was that they put the bag in the darkest, coldest corner of the basement, picked up the baseball mitt, and didn't go back to that bag until September. Hockey Canada is now slowly trying to move tryouts from the spring now to the fall. So right now, a lot of teams try out for the spring. So what that does is it turns around, you have spring hockey, you have summer hockey, and then all of a sudden you're back in September. They're trying to move tryouts to September in the bid to push the season back so that when your season's done in the spring, you're free for the summer. It's in theory, it works out really well.
Yeah.
How much, Beth, of this do you think is parents living vicariously through their kids and hoping for that big Wayne Simmons, Matt Duchene payday? Do you see it?
Yeah,
You do
I
see
see
it.
it. Yeah, I see two types of parents that come to my practice, and one of them is, please let them just go to the dance and be regular people because they are that, you know, into their sport and that's all they want to do. So they come to me and be like, he or she needs to be more well-rounded. Let's work on that. And then the flip side, it's this is all they do. And I've had parents ask me to help their kid come back from concussions when the doctor has recommended them not play ever again. I declined. It's not part of my values, but this is what we're working with parents, and I do think it really happens. I think the parents live through their children and don't really understand that at the end of the day, we need to develop well-rounded, kind people for the next generation.
But I also think it's often the kids themselves, at least I see it. I see parents as well, but I also see it in the kids themselves. If you have a child who naturally has a very competitive personality, then they want to be on the A team. They never want to play rec. You know, when they play King of the Castle at recess, they have to be at the top of the King of the Castle, and they just naturally go that way. So that if you try to put them into another sport and go to swing lessons or something where they're the slowest kid because all they've done is play hockey, that naturally they don't like it, and they resist it a lot. But I think it's really important to keep those options open because often kids don't get to try very many different types of physical activity when they're children. You know, we have hockey, soccer, baseball, but things like you know, rhythmic gymnastics, or fencing, or some of the other, you know, wrestling, some of the other Olympic sports where you can succeed at a very high level don't really come into play for young children. And so if they have only tried one sport, then they really don't have the background and skills to move into those other types of sports once those opportunities become available.
What I find with that is that when you're working with that natural athlete that's all they want to do, is at 15 when they fail for the first time.
It's devastating.
It's devastating, and they don't have the tools or the resilience to push through, and it is stress and it's anxiety, and it's a huge thing for these kids at 14 to go through.
That's when you come in then.
That
right?
I do come
That's
in,
when the sports psychologist
But
comes
if they
in.
played in the playground and had resilience and failed more there in other sports, then they would have more tools.
They'd be ready for it.
This is where the parenting comes in. I mean, you talk about choice and what kids want to do. Like, my kids like ice cream. They would eat ice cream all the time. Frankly, so would I, but don't tell them that. Kids, stop watching now. But as a parent, I say, well, yes, you can have some ice cream, but you also have to eat your Brussels sprouts and get your fibers and all that stuff. Parents, and I hate to keep blaming parents for this, but it's true that they have to drive the bus. They have to understand that the end result, whether you're playing elite soccer and mangling your pinky finger, or whether you're playing high-level hockey, the end result isn't getting the scholarship. It's not going to the NHL. It's you win as a parent if your child is out of university and 25 years old and says, I'm going to go play beer league hockey. That they pick up that love and the physical literacy, and they pick that up for life. That you're helping them make healthy lifestyle choices. They're going to be more physically active. That's the gold medal for a parent.
Let's put this fact file up, everybody, just to get a little background in place. Sheldon, if you would, bring the graphic up, and here we go. A report from 2017 showed that 10% of the general population took a benzo at some point in the past year. Women are almost twice as likely to be prescribed these drugs as men are. And 51% of the fatal opioid overdoses in this province involved benzos. So let's find out more, first of all, about what they actually are. Roger, you want to get us started? What are benzos and what do they do?
Sure, Steve, you're right. You had mentioned tranquilizers. These are referred to colloquially as minor tranquilizers. They were first isolated back in 1955. They've been first approved in the early 60s for the treatment of really a broad set of purposes. These purposes include anxiety, insomnia, alcohol withdrawal, and seizure disorders. And the use of these medications over the last 4 to 6 decades has waxed and waned, peaking in the mid-70s, coming down slightly in the 80s and 90s, then only then to be increasing. In fact, on the last 15 years, we've seen a significant increase. You cited the percentage, the trajectory is going up and up of people who are being prescribed these medicines. Secondly, the number of people who are receiving repeat prescriptions is going up. And thirdly, which is very concerning, is the number of people being prescribed a benzodiazepine with another controlled substance, such as opioids, has also been increasing. So taken together, this, what we call pharmacoepidemiology, has been very concerning to a lot of us.
Tamina, how addictive are benzos?
They're very addictive. We now know that dopamine is increased in the brain after the anxiolytic properties of benzodiazepines can take place. And so just like any addictive medication, like opioids, like cannabis, like alcohol, we're discovering that benzodiazepines are very sticky in our brains. And it's hard. I use the word sticky.
That's
yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound like a pharmacological term.
It's pretty technical. Yeah. No, but it's a good way to think about it. Certain molecules are more sticky than others, and certainly benzodiazepines are right up there.
Do you think they're overprescribed?
Yeah, I think one of the things is that we're seeing a lot of people who previously have been prescribed, and a lot of people are struggling to either take people off the medication or to find ways to find alternate treatments. So they may be overprescribed in a certain way, but I think they're continuing to be prescribed in another way because people just aren't comfortable removing them.
Do you think they're overprescribed?
Yes, and also I think that it's important to recognize that there's alternative possibilities to treat anxiety, such as psychotherapy, and potentially with the addition of psychotherapy plus the prescription of benzos, we see quite good outcomes. And we also see that when people come off benzos, if they've received something like CBT, they are less likely to relapse. Oh, cognitive behavioral therapy,
Got it.
Apologies.
Yes, this is an acronym-free zone.
Yes, they're less likely to relapse into anxiety. And so I think that they are overprescribed, and I think it's important to recognize that there's some alternatives.
I guess it would be easy just to say we're going to blame all the doctors for overprescribing, but I presume patients also put a lot of pressure on doctors to get these pills because they've heard so much about them.
For sure, and they're effective, and they're easily accessible, and they're quick.
And they're quick, meaning what? They work fast?
They work fast, whereas something like psychotherapy can take a lot longer, and it can be a lot more work.
Roger, who gets to prescribe these medications?
Well, all healthcare providers like prescribing them. There's certainly been a wide use of these medications in specialty services appropriately in some settings like psychiatry and also in neurology settings as two examples. But what we've observed, and there's been a recent report here from the United States, is in primary care, there's been a steady increase in the prescription of benzodiazepines during the last 15 to 20 years. And as I was saying earlier, this is coinciding with a quadrupling of co-prescription with opioids. Obviously, this is very concerning because one of the stats that you had, Steve, at the start was the toxicity in terms of overdose. And we know that when benzodiazepines are combined with opioids, it increases the toxicity of these medicines and overdose. So very concerning. I agree with my colleagues that are with you in studio that I do think that there is, in fact, an overprescription. And more specifically, I do not think, in fact, there's been the appropriate assignment of treatment to patients. I've spent the last 15, 20 years, it seems almost as a full-time job, trying to take people off these medicines. People take them for a variety of reasons. I enumerated some of the indications, but one of the primary reasons they take them is because they work, and they work very quickly. But that being said, is that the short-term gain these medications offer is often, if you will, overshadowed by the long-term, the liability. And I agree with the comment about psychotherapy, and I think that there are clearly lots of evidence now to suggest or indicate that CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, is the best way to treat anxiety in the longer term. The issue we get into is real world. And the real world is most busy primary care providers say, I don't have a psychotherapist next door. I don't have the ability to get patients on the internet and coach them through this. They lack the motivation. So some of these structural issues, unfortunately, end up conspiring against us, leading to benzodiazepine overprescription.
All of that having been said, Alexander, would a way to reduce the proliferation of writing scripts for this medication be to prevent family docs from doing it anymore? Make it more restrictive.
Well, I think you can't look to just blame family docs. I mean, like we were saying, a lot of them are continuing old prescriptions, and we don't want necessarily people ripped off these medications. That comes with a lot of harm, too. The other part is people really want to help the people in front of them. And I think, as was just mentioned, we have to provide more services and more help for family physicians to be able to do things. And I think the last part is, it's not only the prescribing, it's the way they're prescribed. So the doses, the high doses, but also the fact that people are going home with months of prescription at a time, which means that a lot of it can get either diverted to the street or be taken inappropriately. So even just training people to prescribe it in a safer way might be a way that we can help curb some of these overdoses that are happening.
Let's set this up. This is a play about a woman with severe depression. You play the lead. She's got a lot of mental health issues. At some point, her psychiatrist says to her, electroconvulsive therapy, electroshock as it is more familiarly called, is advised. So let's start there. What is ECT?
ECT has been around for a long time. It's our most effective psychiatric treatment for treatment-resistant depression, so for depression that has not responded to medication or talk therapy. It's one of our only procedural treatments in ECT, so as opposed to taking a pill, it's quite a bit more invasive. But again, it's very effective. Up to 70% of people with treatment-resistant depression will respond to ECT.
Can you put a little more flesh on that bone? What do you actually do?
So electroconvulsive therapy involves the application of a brief, short electrical stimulus to the scalp to induce a seizure under general anesthesia.
Does it cause memory loss?
So most of the data would suggest that immediately after the treatment, there is some degree of memory impairment, and that may be due to the anesthetic, due to the procedure itself. But when you look at follow-up 3 to 6 months later, in general, people's memory improve. And part of the reason for that is when people are depressed, it can have a profound effect on their memory. And when you successfully treat their depression, that can improve.
What does the evidence say about whether or not it causes any damage to the brain?
There's no evidence that there is damage to the brain, as far as we can tell. There is memory impairment in the period of time around ECT, and including the time that you have ECT, up to a few months on either side can remain quite a bit fuzzy for people if they have memory impairment.
I want to know how much you knew about all of this before you took on this role.
Not very much when it comes to ECT. It's just a very, very basic knowledge or understanding. Also shared experiences from people who have administered ECT and who have received it. And my understanding is it varies with each person, like the degree in which the therapy affects them, or if it is actually effective for them.
But as an actor, I presume you do some research into every role that you get. What kind of research would you have done to get ready for this one?
With her in particular, I just explored her character, not so much on the ECT level, but on the level of her grief and where it comes from. Because I think she mainly deals with the loss of her child at a very young age, and because it was such a sudden loss, without her actually being able to have the coping mechanisms to deal with that loss. And then I guess at the time that she was trying to deal with her grief, other options were presented to her, and whether or not those options were the actually right thing for her, or if it made the situation worse, is I guess what I had to explore as the character.
Now, presume you wanted to do this show because, I mean, A, it's a great show, B, it's a great character that you play, but sometimes actors have an actual personal connection to the subject matter. Do you in this case, or your family, or anything like that?
Absolutely. I think that, especially in society today, I think we would be hard-pressed to not have some kind of relationship with a mental health issue. I think as a society, it's definitely something that we need to address. I'm glad that people are actually talking more about it, shedding light into the subject, because there are so many, there are varying degrees of depression and mental health issues. There's just too many to even start.
And that is the Agendas we can review for this Friday, May the 10th, 2019. All of those conversations are available on our website, that's tvo.org, on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/theagenda, and on our Twitter feed, that's twitter.com/theagenda.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.